Claremont Lincoln University has built online master's degrees for the 21st century leader. Across their 100% online by design degree programs, everything a student learns at Claremont Lincoln University will provide the vision and framework to become an ethical leader in the organizations and communities in which they serve. The degree a student receives from Claremont Lincoln University will prepare them to lead solutions for the complex, dynamic world in which we live. To learn more about what socially conscious education means, and to learn more about the programs offered at Claremont Lincoln University, visit www.claremontlincoln.edu.
Welcome back, everybody. This is the EdUp Experience podcast where we make education your business. Dr. Joe Salustio here with you again and again and again. And I keep saying that on every episode that I'm here again, but that's true. I keep doing these episodes. My producer, Alvin Freitas, is a slave driver. He literally just keeps scheduling me episodes and I keep doing them and I never say any no. So here we are again, and we're at like episode 300 and I don't know now, but a lot. We're doing a lot, and we're getting a lot of great feedback from you, our audience. Thank you so much. Recent comments have been that folks enjoy the frequency, the impact of the leaders that we're bringing on, the diversity of voices, and people are loving it. So thank you so much. We just passed 82,000 downloads the other day. We're on the march to 100K. Of course, if you find 5 minutes, please head to edupexperience.com and give us a rating and review. You can do it right on our website. And if you don't, I will publicly shame you on this podcast. So think about it. No, I won't do that at all, because then you wouldn't listen. That's a vicious cycle to be in. Anyway, I'm done talking to myself. I'm going to bring in my co-host today, special co-host who I've been waiting to co-host with. And she's like, nah, I can't do that one. That guest isn't that important. No, I can't do that one. That guest isn't that important. And our guest today, I said, hey, how about the guest today? She went, oh yeah, I'll be there. So, we'll bring him on in a second. But first, let me bring her on. Her name is Dr. Michelle Cantu-Wilson, and she's Director of Teaching and Learning Initiatives and Special Projects at San Jacinto College. Michelle, how are you?
I am wonderful. Thank you for having me, despite the fact that you just told a bunch of lies in rapid succession. I love all your guests, but yes, I am especially interested in Mark. I'm going to admit it.
You did. And I was supposed to hit this for you before I introduced you. Let me try that one more time. I'll just see your name. Here we go. Here she is, ladies and gentlemen. Dr. Michelle Cantu-Wilson. There, you got the air horn. There you go.
Thank you.
I feel like I'm getting better with my sound effects, but then sometimes I just forget,
You're doing okay. You're doing okay.
How are you feeling about today, Michelle? It's your first time as a co-host on this podcast here. I will tell you, Elvin and I, are very excited to have you. We've been talking about you a lot, and I want to see how you're feeling.
I feel great. I told you that Patrick Methvin turned me on to the show, and I haven't been able to stop listening because you're binge-worthy, Joe.
Oh, thank you. Patrick Methvin, of course, director of whatever he's doing over there at the Gates Foundation, director of education, the Gates Foundation. Great guy. He's been on twice talking about student access, accessibility. And you did make a comment that Patrick got you hooked on the podcast. I thought it was me in my amazing hosting skills, but apparently it was Patrick and his great work he's doing at the Gates Foundation.
You'll have to settle for binge-worthy. I think it's okay. I think it's
right. I was looking for a better compliment, but I'm not going to get it. Somebody who is going to get a bunch of compliments today is our guest. He is in what looks like a corner office in the middle of New York City or Chicago. Could be a virtual background. Hint, hint. We're going to talk a little something virtual today. Ladies and gentlemen, here he is. Mark Atkinson, CEO at Mursion. Mark, how are you?
I honestly, even when I show up for work, nobody even gives me that kind of a welcome. That was just delightful. Thank you.
Well, let's change that, Mark, because I have a question that I have been asking lately of our guests, and I usually ask it in the middle of the episode, but it looks like you're a fun guy, so I think we're going to have a little bit of fun with you, so I'm not worried about that. So I'm going to ask you now, and that is, Mark, if there was a song playing on the radio or on your portable speaker every time you walked into your office at work or into a room or into a meeting, what is the song that defines Mark Atkinson?
Oh, so I was going to say The Sounds of Silence, because when I walk into my office like everyone else these days, there's nobody there. So I don't know. I got to think about that one. But
all right, we'll come back to that at the end of the
episode.
episode. One of my guests said that every time she now walks into a room, that song that she said in this podcast is playing. Her staff plays it for her. So you better pick a good one. So Mark, tell us about Mursion. Get us started. What do you guys do? How do you do it?
We give people a safe place to practice really challenging conversations that affect their job performance at work. So we work across a wide range of domains. We work in education to help principals give feedback to teachers, teachers to work with kids more effectively. We work in healthcare on the sort of bedside manner of doctors and nurses and how patients experience their service and therefore rate their, the care that they're given. And we do an enormous amount of work in the Fortune 500 in America, working on leadership development, sales training, and customer service training.
So part of this is, right, we workers of all, in all industries need what? Conversational skills. We need empathy skills. We need understanding, and we need to know how to have effective dialogue. And we need to be trained how to do that because it's an ever evolving conversation and sensitivities, right? And so how do you deliver the training?
We we provide simulations and we do them through a blend of technology and real human interaction. So we have a virtual simulator that you can experience either in a headset, in a 3D type virtual reality experience, or on a laptop or even on a phone or tablet these days. And you find yourself sitting across from a patient or a group of patients, a group of students, a group of professional colleagues. We're constrained by the technology we use to sort of keep that group relatively manageable, sort of less than 8 people typically, sometimes 2 or 3, and sometimes just a one-on-one conversation with a colleague, that you're giving some feedback to. And that colleague shows up in a workplace that looks exactly like yours. I'm in a virtual office right now. You could be in a virtual factory floor or in a virtual emergency room or in a virtual classroom. And you'd be interacting with a digital image of a character that we refer to this as an avatar, but avatars increasingly look human if you've seen what Hollywood can produce, and we're getting better at that. What we do that's a sort of a sleight of hand is that we use a whole lot of AI to inhabit those avatars and to make them show up as real characters, but we leverage professional performers to actually play the challenging part of the conversation. So that we have improv actors, hundreds of them around the world now, who log in and run shifts that have been trained and certified to manifest the behavioral challenges, the things that people do that push our buttons. And we think of those as things that may show up that are unique to our workplace, but it turns out that there are types of people who either are very hard to draw out and to get to be honest about what's on their mind and what's concerning them, or are extremely in your face and show up with so much emotional intensity that de-escalating them is the skill that allows you to problem solve the issue at hand. And so there's a wide range of those kinds of scenarios. We do thousands of them across the globe, and we give people an opportunity in safety to practice those hard conversations.
Michelle is a director of teaching and learning initiatives. This has to resonate with you big time, right? The learning and the teaching and some almost like a future state of how we wish higher ed could be sometimes with this real time, real life interaction.
Absolutely. And the first thing that I thought of, because I was also in public ed, Mark, I was a junior high teacher, and then I was a junior high assistant principal for 6 years. And so when you talked about that particular evaluation between principal and teacher, the feedback that goes back and forth, and you said actors, I thought, where did you find people who understand the dynamics of education and the levels of relationships that exist within the education system? Because that's quite an interesting angle that you got into. So 2 questions really. How did you find those actors, and who tuned you into the idea that this would be a great place to use your product? I think it is, but where did you get this initial idea from for the education space?
So that's a really good question. So my background, I've actually been working in K-12 professional development for 20 years. And my last company was supported by large projects that were funded by the Gates Foundation. And my first investor, my last company, was the New Schools Venture Fund, which has been sort of behind a lot of the better ed tech startups for many years. I'm old, so I've been at it for a long time. And so the underlying technology that Mursion has built was initially developed in the School of Education at the University of Central Florida as a teaching simulator. It was actually meant to help beginning teachers in their teacher prep program practice working with children that had specific learning differences. And if you think about it, you want, as a beginning teacher, you want to learn your pedagogical routines on kids you're not going to harm or do harm to. And this was an attempt to train actors to model those behaviors and then to give teachers an opportunity to practice. Well, it just so happens the University of Central Florida is in Orlando, Florida. And guess what's right down the road in Orlando, Florida is all those great Disney exhibits with all those character actors who are real professional improv training, who show up as all sorts of fun characters, but
makes a lot of sense,
who take their art form really seriously. And so what you needed was pedagogical expertise married to performance expertise. And there's some real tricks to it. Like you have to unlearn academic vocabulary, if you know the term, right, in K-12. So I can't show up if I'm role playing an 8-year-old and sound like a 35-year-old, or I'm a little north of 35, so my age.
36.
So anyway,
36.
So there's a big training component, and so as an educator, you'll be familiar with this as well. We take the approach to training our actors that people like ETS and others take when they train the people who score performance assessments in learning. So we have sort of exemplar items of what it looks like to do it well. We teach people we give them lots of practice opportunities, and then we certify them against a rubric that they actually can show up and perform a simulation on a reliable basis, predictably over and over again. And we calibrate them over time. And increasingly we use AI to measure whether or not they're staying true to the sort of performance goals of the simulation. But there's a lot of human touch points in what we do to make sure people experience it in a reliable way.
Very good. I was thinking about when I was an assistant principal, you go into the principal certification and you're asked to go to these special trainings within your region to make sure that you're prepared for the job, because a lot of multitasking. And they gave us inbox experiences. Do you remember those?
Yes.
Where you'd show up to the training and they give you a stack of memos and you have to go. This was even before really email. Yeah. So you go through a stack of papers giving you all sorts of duties, and they're memos from administrators, from the board person, from someone from the community, and you have to prioritize. Yeah. And so I was just thinking about how this particular experience could be so great at training leaders that are at that mid-management level who make as many decisions as astronauts, if not more. Yeah. Right. So what has surprised
before you ask the question, I do want to say that also Mark's probably very familiar with principals' offices. As you could see that he's kind of got the mischievous face. He's probably spent some time as a child in principal's office.
Elvin, Joe,
Oh, no, you called me Elvin. We're going to give Elvin a really, really hard time, or maybe give you a hard time now.
No, but I wanted to ask, you do actually, I was an assistant principal, so you do have that grin. So I'm sorry that Joe called it out, but it works for me. So what surprised you about getting into the evaluation or the feedback space of education?
Well, so that's okay. So that I have a lot of experience. The feedback space of education is how deeply ingrained the notion of privacy is with professional practice, and how culturally challenging it is to, in a safe way, make professional practice transparent in such a way that people can interrogate it, analyze it, and respectfully give constructive feedback on how to improvement. There is no job harder than teaching, honestly. And we put so much, like every year as society crumbles around us, we expect teachers to compensate for the health, safety, nutrition, values, and knowledge that we impart in young people. And it's an incredible job. I mean, even if the smartest people on the planet are intimidated when they show up in front of a group of 12-year-olds
and they're vastly underpaid teachers.
And vastly underpaid. And so practice, and of course, if you think about what goes into doing this, you know, you don't get the opportunity to practice, and teachers don't get the opportunity to practice on what they want to really try. And like, I mean, we have academic pursuits like lesson study, so I can pursue the design of a lesson, but what's really going to matter is, did I get the timing, questioning right? Did I give feedback in the right way? When I elicited kids thinking, did I give them a chance to really explain themselves, or did I jump in and correct too quickly for them to learn? Like, there's like an art and science to those things, and you don't just show up and get that right no matter how smart you are. So it's the urgency with which we create a safe place for educators to practice their craft is really important to me.
Michelle, you can keep going because I see you clapping for him. So if you have another one, just shoot it out, because I'm gonna eventually ask him about the avatars and how that works. So if you want to stay on this one, go.
Yeah, no, Mark, I was just, you know, right now I'm in discussions with the Houston Endowment, just spitballing ideas regarding teacher certification preparation programs, right? So you have your traditional student teaching, which I could never do because I got into an alternative certification program because I had to pay for my own life, right? I was independent. I lived on my own. Doing student teaching would have made it to where I couldn't work, and I couldn't afford to do that. There are a lot of us who can't do a traditional student teaching program because we support ourselves or our families. And so these alternative certification programs are very, very important to our survival and to our training, because you have to have that sort of training to get into the classroom, because as you said, it is a science and an art. And so in speaking with the Houston Endowment, you know, discussing what certification programs should look like, one of the things that came up is the contextualization that is needed for teachers in training. And it is so hard to really provide that in a way that is safe both for the students, because it has to be for someone in training, yes, and for the teacher in training. And so the reason that when I was looking up your product, I was pretty blown away, because I thought you took the risk out of one of the most important training opportunities that people have in their lifetimes, one that directly impacts not one student, but many at one time. Teachers feel the weight of that. And so if I were a brand new teacher coming out of, you know, a university, and I knew that I had this AI space to work in, I would feel so relieved by the idea that I would have an opportunity to play and grow and stretch and learn and get feedback in a safe space, so that I don't make those mistakes that a lot of us do make, you know, early in our teaching careers. Yeah, so I don't have a question. Just thank you. And when can I come play?
Well, we would love to have you, and
free account
could help us tremendously. I just want to add one observation that I think I agree with everything you said. And one of the things, my career was built on in the old modality of recording teaching lessons. We did a lot with video, and then video reflection. And you're always looking at, and there's a lot of power in reflection. Don't get me wrong. I built a business and a career doing it, but what you could never do in the reflective process is to capture the anxiety and stress you felt in the moment when you knew the thing you were doing wasn't right, but you couldn't hit pause and say do over. What's really powerful about simulation and all for that, hence the flight simulator, is, you know, the plane crashed, pause, redo, and then you get it right. You get to go, and you do that in short bursts of time. Like, so if the number one thing teachers complain about is so much PD is a waste of their time, there's a lot of people talking at you. Mm-hmm. You know, the buffet may be good, but the rest of the experience leaves a lot to be desired. And the great thing about the thing I think we figured out is in 12 to 15 minutes, we can give you an intense experience that you learn a ton from, to reflect on and try again, and kind of, as I like to say, get the jiggles out before you go do it in the real classrooms.
If you say someone should do something about climate change, you're right. If you say I should do something about climate change, we should talk. We're Claremont Lincoln University, and we've created a dynamic new online Master in Public Administration program in partnership with the Lincoln Institute of Land Policy. This is an MPA designed to give future changemakers the tools needed to take on the issues in today's world. And because there's no time like the present to support our future leaders, the Lincoln Institute is giving $100,000 in fellowships. You could get a $10,000 fellowship towards your MPA. Apply now for the June cohort. www.claremontlincoln.edu.
You know, I want to talk, to bring it to higher education for a second. As you guys both know, higher ed, it's an interesting space because we're dealing with a multitude of issues all hitting at the same time. There's this question of the liberal arts education and its relevancy in a workforce-driven world. There's a question of the undergraduate who gets out into the workforce. Are they really equipped to operate in the workforce as it exists today? And then you have adult students, the lifelong learners or lifelong learners, the adult student who's going to take a program, and then the lifelong learner, where we have breakdowns, we have societal problems, we have conversations, we have these microaggressions, we have structural racism, we have all of these things, and it's sometimes really hard to talk about this stuff. It's really hard to understand it. And so you wonder, what space is safe? What space is not safe? What can I say? What can I not say? How is Immersion helping higher ed professionals, internal professionals, and how are you helping students prepare for the world of work?
So this is a really good question and a really good observation about things that are happening both in the world and in higher education, in my view. We are trying to do a variety of things that touch on the relevant topics you just raised. One, there's a lot of the bias that exists in higher ed starts in hiring committees. And we've discovered that hiring committees are not capable of having some of the kind of difficult conversations that you're describing. And so we actually have a number of agreements with higher ed institutions to help those committees practice some of the challenging conversations, so a little more candor and diversity of perspective can be aired in the selection of the people who populate higher education. That's one area for sure. There's another trend that's been exacerbated by both the economics of education and COVID, which is the sense that I experience isolation and learning in the same context right now, right? So obviously I'm a huge believer in virtual learning, but the social aspect of it is really challenging to pull off. And especially in the technical degree areas, there is a tendency to focus much more on the technical skills associated with those professions, and to lose sight of the fact that people are going to take those professional skills and show up in environments where they're expected to perform as teams and solve problems that we say in K-12 all the time. We want our kids to have higher order thinking skills. And then we basically prepare them technically to be individual contributors, and they don't have those communication skills. They haven't developed the kind of emotional intelligence to manage conflict. And they're not very good at drawing out the input of people that are culturally and experientially different from them. And so in tech, as you know, to take an easy one, you have all these issues around gender and racial sort of bias in the culture that even very well-intentioned companies that invest an enormous amount in the recruiting side of diversity find their efforts fall flat when people show up at work, because they just didn't have any of this in their preparation programs. So they show up under-equipped to kind of do some of the basic things that you'd expect teams to do to problem solve. And productivity tools don't solve those problems. They in some ways, they just accentuate them. So we're really working both in university context and in workforce development context and in job training context to help people manage multicultural teams, engage in difficult problem-solving conversations where everybody gets a turn in conversation, where all ideas get surfaced, where disagreements are managed professionally and in a way that leads to the best idea on the basis of the merits, not on the basis of the proponent winning in conversation. Those are hard situations to put people through, but they're enormously valuable for people who've never had the opportunity to practice it.
I'd say that's the mic drop moment of this episode. Well said.
But I have a question. Everything that you're saying, Mark, that you saw me, practically waving my hands in the air like I was drowning in
some jumping around too. I saw it in there.
I was jumping around when you talked about hiring committees, because you're absolutely right. A lot of the issues start there because of a lack of training regarding things like implicit bias and other things. And then you hit on the, technical trades and how we focus so much on, of course, technical training, and we leave out the entire effective aspect of it, right? Communication and empathy and stuff like that. So how do you know so much about my world in a community college? Where do you get your data on this?
So this is a really good question. So I would say we are only, after many years of working with our clients as partners, beginning to have some of the insights that I'm sharing right now. So we, as both a strength and a challenge of our business, some of us had a pretty strong K-12 background when we started. That, as I explained, the origins. As we moved into higher ed and now more and more into workforce, we sort of would describe Mursion as a sandbox to sort of imagine virtual worlds that look like the world where your conversations take place. Could be a hospital, could be a classroom, could be a meeting room, what have you, factory floor. Imagine characters of every race, gender, ethnicity, age, you name it. And then imagine the ability to put 3 or 4 of them in that environment, having any conversation you wanted to have, what would happen? And what's really interesting, we work with the 3 of the top 3 consulting practices on the globe around the internal conversations that happen in their workforce. And we work with some of the most cost-effective retail food distributors on the planet. So you just think about workforce profiles across that continuum of economic spectrum. The human behaviors that get at the root of all conflict are so similar across all of those dynamics. It's part of the reason why rich people don't have any better relationships than poor people. People are people, and people push our buttons, and we struggle with being honest and authentic, listening actively, taking turns in conversation. I like to say, the only thing we teach people is what, my wife tells you is what you ought to do when you run a good dinner party. Just let everybody have a chance to say what's on their minds. Don't interrupt them.
Glass of wine first, too.
And make sure they take turns when they talk.
So you've created learning labs, really. You have learning labs where you're getting the data from.
Our clients have basically shown us where the problems are. And then we've since built out a function that has mapped these underlying scenarios to a set of competencies that have a research base for what drives leadership performance. So whether it's customer service and the skill of reframing, whether it is leadership and it's about giving feedback to a colleague, whether it's DE&I and it's about allyship and microaggressions, like those things emerged out of years of meeting with the chief learning officers of various institutions who would tell us what are the human skills that stand in the way of success. And we've now mapped those to competency frameworks. And now we've rebuilt scenarios so that we can measure competencies across the work that we do.
Joe, I have one more.
Go.
So you talked about allyship and things like that. We know from the implicit, what is that test from Harvard? But the implicit bias test, it has a name, but I always forget it. Sorry, Harvard. We know from the implicit bias test that the only way to really change implicit bias is through cognitive, practice over and over, repetitive cognitive behavioral practice. And so I think about the opportunity that there is for people in a safe space to work out those biases, because we have them. All of us have them, no matter who we are. And what a great, like you said, sandbox for practicing those behaviors, for scaffolding on those initial, positive gains to help us all get to a place where we have less of those and we see people more.
There's no question, and we've done some randomized control trials with our product in certain contexts, and we've been able to isolate specific behaviors and show how many practice sessions it has to actually change the behavior in the simulator, and then to what extent it moves from simulation into the real world. And we've even begun to do some studies around dosage to know, like pardon the parlance of the day now, everything's about your booster shot. But actually, if you think about other behavior changes, like whether you're trying to get fit, lose weight, diet, quit smoking, you need nudging and support, you need reminders, and you need willfulness to do it. And you need continued practice. Like I am not going to get fit by one weekend in the gym. Like I'm going to have to, and we've now got really good data on what it takes to change behavior. And the problem we run into is that actually, I think everybody understands this science around behavior change. They just don't want to make the investment to actually give people the time to work on the things that would change the behavior. And that's the battle we have is, if you want to build a diverse workforce, to your point, we all have these biases. We're going to have to work at them pretty regularly if we're going to keep them in check. Right. And just the fact that I acknowledge that I have them doesn't mean they don't show up in a meeting every now and then when my guard is down. And so I and all of the rest of us need to continue to work at these things. And we're trying to think, there's a nice literature that Josh Mursion is leading, where he talks about learning in the flow of work, so that these learning experiences don't happen as standalone separate events. When I know I'm about to go give a performance review to somebody, maybe I'll go brush up and do a quick simulation to get my game on, that I don't make the same mistakes. And it's only 12 minutes, let's get it out before I go do it, not do it on Saturday when my boss tells me we're going to do this, the workshop thing, right? That's where we're trying to go.
It's kind of like, if you have to let somebody go and you go in the simulation and you go, "Hey, Michelle, you're fired." But you can't ever say that. You just got to get that out of there. And then you go in and do it the right way.
Exactly.
I wouldn't do that. So, there's so much going on. There's so much here. It feels like our time is way too short to talk about all the benefits that Immersion has. The takeaway for me is, and to your point, practice makes perfect. I mean, we'll never be perfect as people, but we certainly have to practice. But if you don't invest as an organization in the professional development of your people, of your faculty, of your staff, of your students, of your whoever, no one's going to get better. If you leave it up to me, if you leave it up to yourself and your personal biases, without outside help and perspective, you will not improve. In fact, you probably will get worse because you fall back to your biases instead of recognizing them. So you have to have that outside perspective in order to improve. Is this a easy sell, Mark, Mursion, when you go in and you say, "Hey, company, we got this deal," and they're like, "Oh yeah, I'll take it"? Is it, are they, excuse me, is it an investment that maybe some aren't ready to take, don't understand the technology, aren't fully on board with it? Is it too far ahead of its time for some folks to understand?
No, it's not. I mean, it is different. I equate it in some ways to the early days of e-learning, and maybe even a better model for those who are really familiar with building e-learning. when people discovered the power of embedding video in e-learning, like it's simulation for certain kinds of skills. I mean, it's just going to be here. Like the genie is out of the bottle. It's a much more powerful way to let people practice and assess certain kinds of skills that are only known to exist if you demonstrate them. So I think most learning professionals see Mursion and want it. Then the issue where we spend time is, how do I integrate? We are not a turnkey solution. Somebody sets forth what is our allyship program at our organization? That has to be defined. That's not on us. The organizations define that. They have other ways. They could have instructor-led training or online training, however they want to do that. But then we become the practice component that's part of that. So our sales process, to the extent to which it goes longer, it's about how do we fit in and make people to understand, which I think they are quickly grasping, where practice belongs in these kinds of training regimes. And no, our sales process actually goes quite quickly, because once people see it, they want to do it. I mean, it's and learners love it. Like, it's fun. Actually, who knew that having hard conversations could be fun? Avatars do
you get to screw up without having somebody get on you, right? That's
yeah.
We all are going to screw up, but screwing up in a safe place is desirable, right?
Right. And I will say there's also something about the way we approach the problem that I'm very proud of. I am going to fail when I do one of these things. We are going to put you in a situation that you should expect to make mistakes in, but I am not going to shame you or humiliate you for doing it. Yes. You are going to come away saying, oh, I am an old white guy. Like, I have a lot to learn. So but you know what? I just did that. I could call myself a knucklehead and get back in there and do it better the next time. And I'm all the wiser for it, and nobody knows. And the humans behind our systems are there rooting for you, not tearing you down.
Someone that shamed me today is my co-host, Michelle Wilson, for asking better questions. Better questions than me. She didn't even know she was doing it. But Michelle, I'm going to ask Mark our final two questions, but I want to give you one last chance to pop in any you'd like.
I just want to make an observation, and it is, Mark, that you have an incredible product, and I want to go ahead and quit my job and move to where you are and do what you're doing. But aside from that imaginary world, your product, the reason that I think it's so powerful, even when I haven't experienced it, is it has heart. You're saying things that are important to me as a leader, that are important to me as someone who was a faculty member and who was a teacher, someone who is a parent with 3 kids in school, someone who is a faculty developer, someone who wants to be a college president one day. You're saying things that matter. And the most important thing that I heard you say is, this is a safe space where we can learn and grow so that we can be better people all around. I feel like there is a lot of care that has been put into what you're trying to deliver. And I think that, yes, it might work because they get to play with it, but I think people are able to sense that this is a product that is going to improve relations all the way around. And I just want to thank you for developing something that has heart.
That's a heck of a compliment.
That's very kind. And we are always looking for people, so please stay in touch.
My chancellor's not listening.
Yeah. No, yeah. We're gonna edit that part out. No, Mark, we always ask the same 2 questions to every guest that we have on. Number 1, what did my co-host today, Michelle, forget to ask you about Mursion that she should have asked you? I mean, it is her first time co-hosting with me, so I didn't expect her to get everything right. What I know. What did we forget to ask you? What do you want to say about Mursion that maybe an event or something, anything? It's your chance to plug your organization if you have anything you want to say. And number 2, what is the future of higher education going to look like? If you have any thoughts around that.
Your questions were thoughtful and appropriate, and there wasn't anything that jumped out at me that was missing. I felt like you gave me every opportunity to say what is on my mind. I would say that as I think about it in the context of education, one of the things we're really trying to figure out is how we can empower students to use our system to learn from one another. So I'll give you a use case that is really powerful. We know that student tutoring and mentoring can be very powerful. Older kids working with younger kids. We can let our system is multiplayer, so both people can be in the room as avatars. So imagine if the tutor, could be an adult, could be an older student, is your favorite historical character, your favorite superhero, your favorite whoever you want to talk with. What's interesting about the flexibility of a system like this is you disintermediate expertise from its physical appearance. So to the degree to which I don't receive any message, think about therapy, think about all their kinds of learning experiences, because there's something about the age of or the demography of the person delivering that message. I can separate that. I mean, it gives access to so we've been approached around virtual tutoring, virtual shopping, virtual therapy, virtual mentoring, like all kinds of applications that have nothing to do with sort of traditional practice and learning as we talked about it. So those are all ideas that we are playing with that are very much a part of our future. And to your second question, I think where education, I see, what do we know? We know that we're going to live to be, and our kids are going to live to be a hell of a lot longer than we're going to live. And they're going to be moving jobs all the time. And we know that the only thing certain about the skills that the last job they will have, how those skills are going to be different from the jobs they first have, is that we don't know what they're going to be. So the only thing they need to know how to do is learn and adapt. And they're going to have to adapt in a global world that is going to increasingly value problem solving and collaboration, and it's going to get harder and harder and more competitive. So the people that really have these emotional intelligences are going to thrive better than others, and they're going to be training and going to work and training and going to work. This idea that learning was done, K-8 and then through 12 and then post-secondary and then you're done. I mean, we know it's crazy, but what we experience as the university, I think, is going to be woven in and out of our professional careers for the duration of life. It's like imagine a club membership for 30 years, not a 4-year tuition payment. Like, that's what I think learning is going to become.
Subscription models, maybe. I think you're right on with that stuff. Yeah. Man, this episode is just packed with energy. I first want to thank my amazing co-host today. This will not be the last time you hear from her. She'll be back. I'll be begging for her to come back. Her name is Dr. Michelle Cantu-Wilson. There she is. She gets the air horn. And my guest today, esteemed guest here at the EdUp Experience, Mark Atkinson, CEO of Mursion. I encourage you guys to check out Mursion. What's the website, Mark?
www.mursion, MURSION.com.
And there he is. Mark, it's been an absolute honor to have you on today. You said so many meaningful things. The crowd literally will not sit down. Thank you so much.
Thank you both. Michelle, thank you very much. Joe, thank you very, very much.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks for coming on.
There you have it, ladies and gentlemen. You've just EdUp'd.
Claremont Lincoln University has built online master's degrees for the 21st century leader. Across their 100% online by design degree programs, everything a student learns at Claremont Lincoln University will provide the vision and framework to become an ethical leader in the organizations and communities in which they serve. The degree a student receives from Claremont Lincoln University will prepare them to lead solutions for the complex, dynamic world in which we live. To learn more about what socially conscious education means, and to learn more about the programs offered at Claremont Lincoln University, visit www.claremontlincoln.edu.